بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت الحكيم العليم. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك يا ذا الإكرام. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم انشر علينا رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Really, in a sense, this next few sections are Allahu Akbar. There's amazing things happening now that we're getting to. Last week we looked at the conspiracy of the Quraysh. They conspired to kill the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make hijrah. He leaves Sayyidina Ali in his place, who Ali is about 17, and the youth of the Quraysh all go to kill the Prophet ﷺ. He actually walks out of the house. All of them are there. He made the dua from Yasin, وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ سُدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سُدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. We put in front of them a sud, like a barrier, behind them a barrier, and we covered over so they couldn't see. So they didn't see the Prophet. He walked out and threw dust on them, and they woke up in that state, and then when they went in to thinking that it was the Prophet ﷺ, they opened the blanket, they find Sayyidina Ali, and they don't kill him because their quarrel was not with Sayyidina Ali, it was with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so what happens then is the Prophet ﷺ goes to Abu Bakr, and then he sets out, and they have their camels, and they go to the Jabal Thawr, which is just outside of Mecca, and the cave is there still to this day. It's a very small cave. If anybody's ever been there, I went there with Dr. Abdullah Farouk. It's a very small cave, and the entrance to it is very small, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again veiled them. And these were expert trackers. They had trackers who knew they could see where they knew how long they had passed just by looking at the dung, the ba'ra of the camel, and these things. And so then they set out on the path to Mecca, and they go away from Mecca, and the Prophet ﷺ, there's a couple important things here. One of them, and he points this out, which is really important, is that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu had a camel called Qaswa. Right? Qaswa is, the one that can go a long way, far. And this camel, the Prophet ﷺ would not accept it as a gift from Abu Bakr. He wanted to pay Abu Bakr for it. Now, in the past, he'd accepted gifts from Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But the ulama take from this that because this was a hijrah that was for the sake of Allah, the Prophet ﷺ wanted every reward in it. And so he refused to take it as a gift because he was expending his wealth to go fi sabilillah to Medina. So it's important to remember that the Prophet ﷺ is a believer. You can forget that because of his maqam. But you have to remember that he amana ar-rasulu bima unzila ilayhi. He believes in it. And the commands that are in the Quran are commands to him as well as everybody else and more. He has more taklif than the other believers. So he actually has more taklif. He gave all his wealth away. He never went to bed with any wealth. And that's all fi sabilillah. So he's doing this fi sabilillah. He is fi sabilillah. So he's making hijrah, and this is maktub for him. This hijrah is his hijrah. And so he doesn't want anybody to have a part of that. Abu Bakr is already honored with the sahbah. What more reward than to be the one? And there's one story that he doesn't mention in here that some of the other seerah mention, is that Abu Bakr was actually bitten by a snake inside the cave. and the Prophet was sleeping on his lap. It was very small place. And he didn't want to waken the Prophet. And he actually had tears from the pain, which woke the Prophet. So they set out, and now obviously in Medina, they're waiting. They've got news. The Muhajirin are starting to come now. These are Muhajirun from Quraysh, and from the Muwali of Quraysh, and the slaves, and these poor people. On the way out, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet, reveals a verse in the Quran, إِنَّ الَّذِي فَرَضَ عَلَيْكَ الْقُرْآنَ لَرَادُّكَ إِلَى مَعَادٍ. And this was a promise to the Prophet that he was going to be returned to Mecca. Ma'ad is the place of return. He'll go back to Mecca. So he's promised that he will go back to Mecca, and obviously this is fulfilled, but after several years. And then another interesting thing that happens is he descends upon a woman with Abu Bakr whose husband was out, and they had an old goat that wasn't giving milk because of the drought in her area. And the Prophet ﷺ put the hand on the udder, and it gave milk. And when her husband got back, he asked her what had happened, and she said, Rajul Mubarak Zarana. And he said, this must be the man that the Qurayshis are opposing. So he knew. So the Prophet ﷺ now, it's really spreading around Arabia about his affair. And what he does is he goes to a place now in Quba, which is just outside of Medina. And it's interesting that the people who see him, the first man who sees him is a Jew. Because the Jews went out to see as well. They were all waiting too up on these kuda, these high places, to see if they could see it. And a man who was on his way back to Mecca with a caravan actually gave Abu Bakr and the Prophet ﷺ new robes. And so they actually had white robes on that were new, which would be unusual because when you journey, so they would have been very striking coming into this place. And this Jew sees him and shouts from the top of his tongue, his voice. He says, Ya awlad Qayla, this, he said, Hada jaddukum qad ja'a. Jaddukum, he meant haddukum, like your wealth has come. La yanfa'u dal jaddu. Jadd is wealth. And so he said, Hada jaddukum qad ja'a. And this is again, antaqahu Allah. Allah made him say that. Ya awlad Qayla, hada jaddukum qad ja'a. Your wealth has come. Now, there's an amazing ishara here, I think. And that is, it is the Jews that prepared the Aus and the Khazraj for their acceptance of the Messenger of Allah. They gave the bushra. They were the first ones that gave the people of Yathrib the bushra of the Prophet ﷺ. So it would be fitting that Allah made them the first one that would give them the bushra of his actually entering into Islam. It's the Jews that gave the bushra of the coming of the Prophet ﷺ, despite themselves. Despite themselves. So it's an extraordinary event. And the Prophet ﷺ comes and says a beautiful thing here. He says, he gives a small khutbah to these people that have come out to greet him. And he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, afshu salam. Spread peace. Afshu salam. And this is, again, an embodiment of the message that he's giving. وَأَطْعِمُ الطَّعَامِ. Right? And feed food. وَصِيلُ الْأَرْحَامِ. And bind the ties of kinship together. وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامِ. And pray in the night when others are sleeping. تَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ بِالسَّلَامِ. And if you do those things, you'll enter Jannah with peace. And then another thing, Salman now is in Medina, which he mentions, and although he's been born a Zoroastrian, he's now a slave of a Jewish man. He was captured by Arabs on his way to Yathrib, sold into slavery, and he becomes the slave of a Jewish man in Medina, and he's working on these date palms, picking the dates. And he keeps hearing, he also hears from the Christian sage who actually told him he was a bishop in Mosul. And he went to him, he was with a man in Syria who said, go to Mosul, there's a righteous bishop there. So he actually traveled there. And the bishop in Mosul, just before he died, he said, the time has come for a prophet to manifest in Arabia. And he told him, he was thrown out of his own city and immigrate to a place between two lava beds, which is Medina. There's two lava beds on both sides. A place between two lava beds, there'll be date palms there. And then he described them. He said he won't eat from charity, but he'll eat from a gift. And between his two shoulder blades is the seal of prophecy. So this is a very exact description of the Messenger of Allah. And Salman, radiallahu anhu, set out to find the Prophet ﷺ and ends up by Allah in Medina. And this is the idea of sincerity. وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. The one who has tiklan of Allah, he'll guide his heart. So Allah guided Salman to this place, and then he hears the Jews telling, and now he knows. He takes dates, and he goes and gives them to the Prophet, and he tells him it's sadaqah, he won't eat from them. And then another time he goes and gives him, and says this is hadiyah, and he ate from them, so he knew that. And then there's a third time when he sees him, and he's trying to see the seal, and the Prophet moved his cloak aside so he could see it. But he knew, he was just wanted to see these signs that this man had given him. Now, what happens, he gives the date that the astronomers, Muslim astronomers came up. It's the 27th of September, 622, right? So this is 13 years after the Prophet ﷺ begins his 13 lunar years, after he begins his message in Mecca. And he sets out he prayed also, he stayed 3 days in Quba, and he did pray the first Jumu'ah. He prayed Jumu'ah there. And there's a masjid built that's there in Quba, and it's a mazar. It's a place the Prophet ﷺ encouraged to visit it, and people can do that. And so he went in now, he comes in, the women of the Najjar. And remember that the Banu Najjar are who? Banu Najjar. They're akhwal. They're the Prophet ﷺ's maternal relatives. So he has relatives in this city because remember, his grandfather, Muttalib, is Abd al-Muttalib, is Shayba, who migrates from Medina because his father married a woman from Medina, a noble woman from Bani Najjar. And then Muttalib, when his father goes there and convinces her to let him go to become a leader in Mecca, then he does, and he comes, and they see him riding behind him. They call him Abd al-Muttalib. So he's originally from Medina. So the Prophet ﷺ is going to a place where he has kinship bonds. And the Bani Najjar come out, and they sing the Tala' al-Badru alayna, and the Prophet ﷺ comes in with Abu Bakr. Now, there's an extraordinary event that occurs here. Again, this is the fatana of the Messenger of Allah, which is one of the 4 wajibat of prophets, right? They have to have sidq, amana, tabligh, and fatana. They have to be truthful, trustworthy. They have to convey what they're commanded to convey, and they have to have fatana, which is sagacity, wakefulness, an intellectual acuteness that surpasses other people. Now, if you remember the story of displacing the stones, this is the hikmah that the Prophet ﷺ was given. Again, these people now, many of them have become Muslim. They're all anxious for him to come into the city, but he has a political issue here. which is where is he going to go? Whose house? And these are Arabs, remember. This is not, you have Abdullah bin Ubay, who sees himself as the leader. Now you have Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, who's another leader. You have leaders that need to be recognized because the Prophet ﷺ he's going to be establishing ties in this city. And so what he says, when they're all saying, Anzilu indana ya Rasulullah, come and stay with us, he says, and they're grabbing his camel because they want to take his dabish, the things that are on the camel, they want to take it. And he says, Khallu sabilaha fa innaha ma'mura. Let her go because she's under a command from Allah. This again is deep hikmah. The camel goes and it literally is stopping at houses and looking, and they're all waiting with this expectation. Where's this camel? And it just keeps going and it's walking through different places and comes down to a place. And what's so amazing is when the Prophet ﷺ asks, who owns this place? It's owned by two orphans. And what are their names? Sahal and Suhail. Which is amazing, because this is what the Arabs say when they welcome somebody. Ahlan wa sahlan. And he, wati'ta sahlan. You came to Sahal. So he comes to Sahal and Suhail's place. And that's where the animal comes, and that's where the masjid is going to be. And it was also a graveyard of the mushrikeen in Jahiliyyah. And they actually take the bodies of the mushrikeen and take them out. And that's where they build their masjid, which is the Maliki proof that a masjid can be on a graveyard. So then another very interesting thing, that he asks the orphans, he says he wants to buy the land. They say, no, they want to give it. He refuses again, and they agree on a price. And this is an important thing because here's the izzah of the Prophet, the iffah of the Prophet. He's not using his position as the Prophet, where people, of course, they don't want to sell him anything. They don't want to. He's not using that. He's teaching them to have iffah, right? Not to use that position. And also that it's a place for the masjid, and there's more reward for those who give out. So he buys the land, and there's another apocryphal story that actually indicates that the land was given to him as a waqf by the Yemeni king who had attacked Medina, and that was the house where Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, who he goes into his house, because Abu Ayyub takes his things and immediately goes with the bags before he can say anything, and then they asked where he's going to go, and he said, a man is with his baggage. So he goes into the house of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, and then they have a problem because he has two floors. He has a loft for the bedding. The Prophet ﷺ wants to stay on the bottom to greet the people, but Abu Ayyub and his wife are on the top. They're worried about stepping over the Prophet ﷺ's body, like putting their feet over his body, because in traditional Arab culture, in the Jahili culture as well as in some Arabian cultures today, especially the peninsula, to put your feet towards anybody is a gross insult. And so, and it is in this culture as well. So, the Prophet ﷺ is there in the house of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Now, the first thing, he does two things, which is very significant. So the first ayah revealed in Medina is Waylul lil-Mutaffifin. It's the ayah that deals with buying and selling. Medina is named because he says, when he's going to Yathrib, it was called Yathrib, he says to not go directly to Al-Madinah, and he calls it Al-Madinah. And so it becomes known as Al-Madinah, because that's the word that the Prophet used when he was entering into it. And Al-Madinah is obviously, the root of it is deen. Because deen is related to, it's related to several things. But one of the meanings of deen, or dain, is a debt. It also means dayana, to interact, to transact, to loan, to take a loan. It's from the abad in Arabic, a word that has the opposite meaning. Dayan is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ad-Dayan. Deen is also a rain, a sprinkle, a rain that comes again and again, a recurring rain. And so really the idea of a Medina is the place where there's human transactions. It differs from the Badiyah in that the Badiyah is primitive. It's from Bada'a to begin with. It was the first state of human beings which involved the maximum of their affairs is bartering. They don't really have coinage. They don't mint coins. They don't have the sophisticated transactions of a city. So Al-Madinah is the place where the deen really takes root and takes hold, because Islam is a civilizing force. It's a religion of the city. That does not exclude the Bedouins. They're Muslims as well, and they have rules that pertain to them. But at its fundamental essence, it is a deen of the city. Mecca is al-Qura, and that's where it begins, and where it's completed is Al-Madinah. So it is, human beings are here to civilize themselves and civilize their world. Civil is from the city, right? In Latin, civitas, the city. And so a civilized person is somebody who lives in the city, because that's where people are supposed to be. They shouldn't be like primitive people, right? And that's related to learning and education. This is in no way detracting from primitive Aboriginal people, but that is not an ideal. The ideal is learning, erudition, scholarship, reading, all these things that the Quran gave to human beings, because this is what elevates us out of that primitive animal-like nature. Because primitive people tend to be closer to the animal nature, right? Many of them don't dress traditionally. The Aboriginal people didn't wear clothes or wear very small amounts of clothes, things like this. And the way they lived was extremely rudimentary. Whereas the more the human being becomes civilized, the more the humanity emerges. Now, one of the odd things about the end of time is the opposite happens. According to the hadith, the people outside the cities have goodness in their hearts, and the people inside are wretched like wolves. So it's actually kind of the opposite. And also there's an important theme in the Islamic tradition, which is that the role, the sacred role of the Bedouin and the Aboriginal people is to renew civilization. From the first story of Adam alayhi salam's two sons, Habil and Qabil, one of them is the farmer, and the other is the pastoral nomad. And the farmer who has to stay in one place, he is the envious one of the freedom that the pastoral nomad has, and so he tries to he kills him. And this is what the city person will often do, is eliminate and this is what Christianity did to traditional peoples, whereas Islam didn't do that. It actually appreciated the fitra state of those people, because there is something of purity there. So don't get it completely. You know, there is something very powerful in the Aboriginal people and in their fitra state that Islam respects, and it's also where the Prophet was sent as a child to be with those people, because they recognized that there was a purity of spirit in those people. So now, because Allah reveals that verse, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ, the first thing the Prophet asks is where the marketplace is. And they tell him that it belongs to the Jews. So the Jews, because the Aus and the Khazraj were what? They were farmers, right? Their dominant livelihood was from dates. Right? Dates were where they were making their livelihood. They were not merchants like Mecca. I mean, obviously they had some degree of commerce, but not like Mecca. The Jews were merchants. So they had control of the marketplace in Mecca. So the Prophet does two things. He has the Muslims set up their own marketplace, and he sets out building the mosque. And that's Islam right there. Deen and dunya. You see, that's it. Deen and dunya. We have our own place of worship, and we have to maintain economic integrity and independence. And that's the foundation of the strength of a people, right? That is the foundation. Once a people begin to import, Sayyidina Ali said, لا خير في قوم يأكلون ما لا يزرعون ويلبسون ما لا ينتجون. There's no good in a people that eat what they don't grow and wear what they don't weave. Right? So it's very important. What he did is a very powerful political act. And obviously this is going to upset the Jews because they see the problem here. It's not just a religious problem, it's an economic problem. And again, this goes back to the same fears of the Quraysh. And you're going to see, if you haven't already, why these people are all opposing the Prophet. It all boils down to one root disease. Now, he calls this next chapter the chapter of harmony and discord. Obviously, when the Prophet comes into Medina, it creates harmony for the believers and discord for the unbelievers and for a new group of people that are going to emerge that they have not seen yet. And these are the munafiqun. They did not have experience. Remember this, the people in Mecca were all mukhlisun. They do not have yet in their frame of reference the idea of the religious hypocrite. And this is going to emerge in Medina. Now, the Prophet ﷺ in the courtyard, they took all of the bodies of the mushrikeen and took them outside of the city, and then they begin to build the masjid. And they're facing the Jerusalem wall. They also made a prayer niche because they're still praying towards Jerusalem. And then another thing that's really important is the Messenger of Allah, who is 53 years of age at this point, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is out in the heat with the Muhajirin and the Ansar building the masjid. He's out there with them, working with them. And they sing, La aisha illa aisha al-akhirah, Allahumma arham al-ansar wal-muhajira. They're like doing it with gusto. These people are believers and they have the Messenger of Allah between them. They're in an amazing state, spiritual state. And the Prophet ﷺ would add sometimes to their chorus, but he wouldn't put it in poetry. He'd say, Allahumma arham al-muhajirin wal-ansar. So he was in with them, and they were singing this as they're doing work, right? And whenever you see somebody singing when they're working, it means they're enjoying themselves. Right? If they don't sing when they work, it means they're not enjoying themselves. Now, another really important event, the Prophet ﷺ makes a contract with the Jews. And this is really important because it's, again, something essential to the tradition of Islam, and that is that the Prophet ﷺ is allowing the Jews to maintain their own religion. They're Yahud, they have the Torah. Marhaban, if you want to become Muslim, that's fine. If you don't, that's also fine. You follow your religion, you have your prophet, right? And there's no la ikraha fi din. There's no compulsion here, no coercion. Now, the Jews agree to this contract. And what's important to remember here is that each one of the Jews had aligned with a clan of the Aus or the Khazraj. So they are mawali. They have clan ties. These are being maintained. But now the clans have allied themselves with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he writes in the contract that the clan ties are maintained and that anyone who's oppressed from those people, we will help.